Well, we'd like to welcome Matt Mercer to Dragon Talk one more time. That's right. Matt Mercer. This is number 3 interview, I think, for you here on Dragon Talk.
Yeah. Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
A couple more, and you get a jacket.
That's right. We keep threatening that for Wolfgang Bauer, but never actually making a jacket.
Coming back, and we're like, no, it's actually 9. Sorry.
It's the 8-timers club. Sorry.
There you go.
Next time you'll get something.
Yes.
But we also have Mr. Chris Perkins here. Yes. And we are excited to talk about Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, an excellent book that was birthed in some ways through the second campaign of Critical Role. Is that right?
Yeah. Our first campaign took place on the land of Taldore, and that was kind of the hub of where that took that whole story kind of centered around. The current campaign we've been running for the past 2 years is pretty much wholly within Wildemount, an entirely separate continent, its own societies and unique landscapes and challenges and conflicts, and it's been really exciting to explore, and I'm super excited for people to have the opportunity to learn a lot more about it and see a lot of things that aren't even going to be seen in our campaign.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, people will be able to learn some of the secrets that you have not yet even revealed. Is that true?
Maybe a handful, but I also wanted to make sure that the campaign that we're playing didn't lean too much into the information that's in this book. So the idea is the storyline we're playing right now is very unique and tailored to those characters and those players. So they're exploring a lot of the familiar themes and places and story elements that are in the book, but nothing to the point where people feel like they're playing the same campaign that we're playing. It is instead an open book of so much possibility, where they can play alongside or entirely new, unique experiences outside of what we're playing right now in our campaign.
And Chris, you were working with Matt for a long time on developing what this book was going to kind of look like and be. Is that right?
Well, we had some preliminary discussions at the outline stage about what the book was going to be, and then Matt disappeared for a few months. Rallied an army around him to come up with the text and the map orders and everything for this book, and then I just sort of swooped back at the end and kind of turned all of that text into, or worked with a number of people here to turn the text into the book form. Just getting it to fit, making sure all the chapters lay out properly, making decisions as needed about what to keep and what to jettison, and working with Matt on those kinds of decision-making moments to make sure nothing got cut that was so sort of intrinsic or important to the product that it would not function the way he wanted it to function.
Got it. So it was like a real melding of minds, being like, oh, here's the creative storytelling, but then here's the D&D kind of book sensibilities, and then they crashed together and they left a baby book underneath it.
But a 304-page baby.
Indeed. It's a big baby with a poster map on the back.
And you cut. How much did you cut from this?
Oh, it probably amounted to, I want to say about 16 or so pages of material.
Yeah, nothing too major.
Was that hard for you, Matt? Did you fight him on some of that?
No. For one thing, my level of experience in this sphere compared to the experience of Chris and Crawford and these people is much smaller. And this has been very much a learning experience of me wanting to make sure that it's a collaboration. As part of that collaboration, they know better than I do as far as what should be in a final product. If there's something I'm really passionate about, I'll definitely voice it.
Right.
But and with any sort of creative endeavor, part of it is killing your babies, as they say. There are things that you just have to let go. And it's one thing to have it just be just cut, and you're like, it's cut. You're like, whoa, okay. But it's been really awesome about here's why. If there is a way we can fit it in, let's talk about it. If not, these are the reasons. And it's like, yeah, totally, I get it. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a better, more concise product without some of this kind of floating riffraff that we didn't necessarily need.
We had to make sure there was room for lots and lots of great art. We were very, very fortunate.
Yes.
One of the most interesting things that we got out of it really was a pool of terrific Critical Role artists that we can work with again on future D&D products.
Very nice.
Yes.
We're excited about that.
Yeah.
I was really excited to hear about Devin Rue. We've had her on the podcast before.
We share a birthday.
Yes.
We do.
And she made amazing maps for this.
Yes, the poster map and all of the interior location maps.
Very exciting.
Devin knocked it out of the park.
This is a very immersive Critical Role experience from cover to cover.
I hope so. I hope people like it.
Yeah.
For folk, I mean, this may seem like a strange question for as large of an audience as you have, but for folks who may be coming into this with new eyes and new thoughts about what is Wildemount, what would you say is the tenets or the major themes that goes through playing in this continent?
Perfect. Yeah. So to enjoy this book and the contents of it, you don't need to know anything about Critical Role or the campaign that we play. This is a book that is designed for anybody who wants a world to run a D&D campaign in. If you watch the show, there's a lot that will be familiar to you and a lot of context you'll have that maybe others wouldn't. But it is wholly the entire continent of Wildemount at your disposal to explore and customize and pull from and make your own campaigns flourish and live. The continent itself is broken down into 4 major regions, I guess you would call. There's the Menagerie Coast, which is a coastal area along the Lucidian Ocean that has a series of island chains around it where like a very nautical type setting is easy to run for a campaign. There's Western Wynandir, which is where the Dwendalian Empire is. Very much kind of, say, Eastern European themed or Prussian-esque empire that is more classic fantasy, though a little darker, a little more gothic, a little more intense than your colorful, happier, fantasy scapes you see in a lot of modern media. To the east, there is Eastern Wynandir, which is where Jorhas is, which is this broken landscape of wild, weird fields and mountains and swamplands that was once destroyed by an ancient battle of the gods, and as such, it is filled with unique waste folk and monstrous folk, as they're called in many books. A society that is not intrinsically human or your standard human dwarf elf. It is goblinoids, it is bugbears, it is dark elves, and they're not evil. They're just their own society. And then to the north, there is the Biting North, which is a lot more of the Arctic cold landscapes where a lot of ancient mysteries and history has been long buried under ice and snow, and the few survivors do so outside of the major societies and sometimes the major laws that exist within there. And so in this mix, there's a lot of opportunity for conflict, there's a lot of opportunity for mystery and discovery, and a lot of really unique challenges to be had. And this book is kind of our love letter of putting our minds together and giving it to the world to do with it as they wish.
I love that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It feels like a great sandbox for people to be able to jump into, even without all the pre-knowledge of what's been happening in Critical Role. Like, it's just, here's an interpretation of a fantasy world. And in some ways, as you're talking about it, and in some conversations that I've had with Chris in the past, it's really amazing to see, this was a homebrew in some ways that took elements from D&D's past and combined them with your own ideas, and here it is wrought in beautiful glory in this book. And it's kind of a great aspiration for dungeon masters out there to create something as living and breathing as this. But it also feels very much like what we would have imagined 30, 20 years ago, playing and reading about D&D books and be like, oh, I want to do this, but I want to make it my own unique spin.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of what I wanted it to be. I never intended originally for this to be a book, of course. When you create your homebrew worlds, it's the idea of you're building it for your players. You're building it just for your own creative outlet, to be honest. A lot of people, when they've been dungeon mastering for a while, or even beginning, and they just have that creative writing, tick in their brain, you have these imaginative landscapes and these worlds and these people that you just need to put somewhere. And D&D is a wonderful outlet for that sort of creative energy. So having this world that was homebrewed and created in some ways collaboration with my players and their character stories, and then have the opportunity to put it together with Wizards of the Coast and these wonderful people has been extremely surreal. I cannot express how surreal. And then holding the physical book in my hands just in this past week has been a very emotional experience.
Yeah, I bet.
And
How many tear stains are on those pages right now?
Oh, I ensured to wear a tear guard when I was reading it.
Nothing shall touch this book.
Exactly, but no, it's been really wonderful, and I'm really excited about it, and I really hope people enjoy it.
So
it is the first D&D campaign setting expressly designed for 5th edition.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you.
Oh, yeah.
Just was it this week, Matt, where you retweeted a
Good thing you
tweet
didn't tell him that.
from 2014, where you had just been like, "Hey, this 5th edition thing is pretty cool. I'm going to check it out."
Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody picked that up. Like a 6-year-old tweet when I first got my Player's Handbook of 5th edition. I was like, I'm kind of liking this edition. And it's just weird
Oh
and
my
surreal.
God. Yeah, Greg mentioned in our intro that it had been about 5 years. Critical Role has an anniversary coming up because
Yeah.
Greg started at Wizards right around the same time that Critical Role
Yeah.
launched. So he's
we're coming up on our 5-year anniversary.
that's
This is before we
crazy.
went
It's
streaming.
only like part of
Yeah.
it just seems like only 5 years, but then that doesn't seem like that. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that long, but it feels
Yeah.
like it's been forever.
That's because 2019 was 6 years long.
Yeah, that's because
Physically.
January 2020 was 6 years long.
Yeah. Physically, it feels like it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mentally pretty quick.
Yes.
So
It's been 3 years.
I'm curious
Feels
what-
like 30.
that was good.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
Jesus Christ Superstar. Feeling it.
So I'm curious about how much of this world was already fleshed out when you were writing this versus how much of it you just decided to create on the spot and fill these 304 pages.
Like thematically and outlined, a lot of it was already, structured in broad strokes and ideas. Like I knew what the overall look of the continent was, the overall themes of the different societies and the conflicts inherent there and some of the mysteries and kind of historical ways that I've ingrained it in Exandria as a whole, which is kind of the overall world that this setting takes place in. But and some of the stuff I'd fleshed out for our campaign before this book opportunity even came up. But a lot of the things that aren't central to like the Dwendalian Empire and the Menagerie Coast and Jorhas, things like to the Biting North and to the Miskat Strand and a lot of the more detailed spaces that we weren't yet going to explore in the campaign, I had to create for this book in advance. Any dungeon master knows it's really hard to build everything before you play because you'll go crazy and they'll put you in a room.
What was it like working with Joey and James and Chris? Because I hear they're all really difficult.
They're a challenging
Yeah,
bunch.
they seem like they are.
These are the freelance writers who contributed a lot of to this.
Correct. Yeah, they're. I'd worked with Joey previously on our first Tal'Dorei guide we did with Green Ronin years ago, and he was marvelous and really kind of pulled me out of a bind of I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. Then this book came up, and I was like, okay, I know a little more what I'm doing, but I still need help. And so brought Joey and brought Chris and James, and they were all been phenomenal. And Hannah Rose, who helped copy edit and edit the book, all of them helped contribute so much to keeping me sane, and just providing their own fresh perspective to elements of the book and creating things in ways that inspired me as well. And it was just a very wonderful collaborative process that I think, from my experience, and I hope they had a similar experience, there wasn't a point where I wasn't excited for everything we were doing together. And when we would talk weekly, we would meet up via video conference weekly to discuss what we've done and kind of disseminate what we needed to do. And we were all so excited during those meetings and returning to show each other what we worked on. So it was energetic and the quality, I think, really shows.
That's awesome. Can we give them shout outs by their last names too, just in case people don't know
Yeah,
who
sorry.
Joey is?
Yeah, sorry. Joey or James Hayek. I think it's at James Hayek on Twitter. I don't know what his actual Twitter handle is. James Intricasso and Chris Lockey are the writers, and then Hannah Rose as the editor. And they're all brilliant. I can put up a tweet with information when the book comes out too, and you guys can check out everything they've done because they all have their own plethora of work previously.
I love everybody you mentioned, but Chris Lockey is someone that I've just seen online a bunch of times. We met in person at a couple of events. I think actually at the Force Grey Lost episode was where we met face to face for the first time, and I think it was even before he was working very closely with you. But yeah, I was really, really excited to hear that he was contributing to this book, and it really shows in the writing.
So he's done a lot of work with Kobold Press, and he's one of those creators where his design aesthetic can go anywhere it needs to go, but he really loves and enjoys and thrives in spaces of like darker, stranger, kind of almost cosmic horror themed elements. And so I was like, oh, I have a region for you to take a look at. And I just let him go. and it was beautiful.
Yeah, so is that how you guys work together? Like, did everybody flesh out a different region, and then that's what you guys came back with and talked about? Like, in this region, this is what I'm thinking, and
A lot of it went that way. Like the three main regions that I had fleshed out were the Dwendalian Empire, Xhorhas, and the Menagerie Coast. So those are the ones that were kind of more central to the campaign too that we've been playing. And I knew those very intimately. The Mistcath Strand, also known as Blightshore, and elements of the Biting North, like Islecross, I had outlined them and themed them and kind of broken them down in a much less defined way. I didn't have the cities written out. I didn't have those locations very thoroughly detailed. I had just kind of the broad strokes, and so I got to give each of those little regions to Chris and to James and say, go, be creative, have fun, come back, and we'll tweak and change from there. And it was just a really cool collaborative process to just kind of let them go.
What an amazing assignment! Go. Just did you give them any parameters, anything like this must-haves or don't-dos, or how do you work together so that they don't all do the same thing?
No, I gave them all the outlines and themes and everything that I had previously developed in those settings. So I gave them the name, I gave them the history, I gave them the general feel. Like for Islecross, it's it's this frozen, solitary north of anything can happen, but it's locked beneath the ice or fog of mystery. Desolate, isolated locations and what that can do to the individuals that live there. Weird magics and strange, released arcane mysteries that can alter and mutate the world in ways you don't expect. And like that, go from there. And then he gets to create in that space and come back with where his brain runs.
That's so cool. That's just what you do, like all the time.
Yeah.
You just make stuff up.
True.
So what was it like being? I mean, you weren't a writer on this one, Chris. You were more of
just sort of a guide.
A guide, yeah. So what was an example of a guideline that you would give, or be like, hey, we usually do this, so this is a little bit different, but maybe if we went a little bit more this way, it might be really great for fans, if there is anything like that.
Oh, I can't think of anything like that. For me, it was more like just making sure that there was enough information there that the DMs picking up for the first time, or players, depending on the section of the book, would have everything that they felt they needed without having too much information that it suddenly became intimidating or daunting. And other things that I was more or less involved in was just making sure that, for instance, the monsters were in their sort of most playable state, that they retained the essence of what they could do, but the mechanics and the text were simple and streamlined. So a lot of my work was kind of hidden. Like when you look at the book, it's not like you can just point and say, "Oh, Chris did that." I didn't do any of that. That's all Matt and company. My stuff is all invisible.
Right, but that's that invisible hand.
Yes.
Probably is
yes. Like we discovered, like the Gazetteer is 100+ pages long. So one of my tasks in laying out the book was realizing that we had to trim some of that down because it was even longer, and it was just kind of ending badly, and there were bad breaks all the way through it where titles were like too low on the page. And so to nudge things up and to get titles sitting properly in their right places, you have to make decisions about formats and just to make the book more presentable and more digestible. That's kind of where I was involved the most.
And that's the kind of stuff you only get by having produced several books like this.
Correct. And then the other process that we haven't really talked a whole lot about, and Matt can also talk about this because this was kind of new to him, is the art review process.
Oh, yeah.
We have a system internally for reviewing art using a database, and we review art at the sketch stage and the final stage, but both Matt and I were involved in the art reviews. Matt generally making sure that it hit the emotional beats and the content beats, and me and Kate on the back end making sure that it hit D&D beats.
Right. Kate Irwin, art director.
Kate Irwin, art director, extraordinaire.
Who wrote the art orders? Did that come from you, Matt?
That came from me,
okay.
Which was the second time I've done art orders for anything ever, and learning the very well-developed, long, proven process that Wizards of the Coast does their art orders was a really great learning experience for me, because at first, like, I want a pretty picture with these things in it. It's like, no, you have to be very specific with everything, not just beyond the content of the art itself, but also the mood you want it to evoke, the feeling you want the reader to look at and then feel pulled out from inside them. And so
Yeah, so
going through and being inspired by that was cool.
I was just gonna say, like, for folks who may not know the inside baseball of things, an art order actually is a description of a paragraph of text, essentially about like what you think a image should look like on this page, and then we hand that to an artist who gets commissioned and then creates that image, and then it goes through the review process.
Yeah.
So the specificity in that paragraph is important, because otherwise you just end up with like, well, I don't know what I'm drawing, or the artist doesn't have enough direction.
You also need the right kind of specificity.
Right.
It's not just hitting them with a bunch of details, because you have to be sort of short and succinct, because artists can only internalize so much information before it starts to get in the way.
Yeah.
And the other thing we can't do is compose the illo for them. We can tell them the elements of the illustration, but we leave the composition to the artist.
So it's a little bit like dungeon mastering an artist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. And that's what's kind of one of the cooler aspects of that whole process was finding that fine line of being specific in the things that you felt were important as guidelines, and then seeing where the artist took it and ran with it. Kind of similar to how I did with some of the writers in the project, and then having them come back and surprise you and be like, this is so much cooler than what I thought, or this is really, really cool. A couple things here we need to tweak to make sure that it fits these other things that I maybe have forgot to mention or wasn't clear about, or just getting us on the same page. And that back and forth note process was really, really painless. The artists were incredible to work with. Kate was so wonderful to help me through that entire process. And the illustrations in this book, the art in this book they're phenomenal. I'm still blown away.
I love paging through it and looking at the artwork, and I can't wait for people to check it out. It does feel like a different flavor of Dungeons and Dragons than what's been presented in the D&D 5th edition books. Even, very different than Acquisitions Incorporated or Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. And I think that's really important. I like that. I mean, you mentioned how this is the first one designed for 5th edition in some ways. And I just love that we're infusing all these different flavors of D&D that people can take and pull from and bring into their own game.
Yeah. The other thing I like is in a world book, or a book that talks about a world and describes it in detail, putting more emphasis on environments is important. Often in our books, we tend to lean pretty heavily into character.
Yeah.
And in a book like this, you just want to see these magnificent places
and how they differ from other worlds and other things like that. Yeah. So you mentioned how dungeon masters are obviously going to be able to take a lot of inspiration from this book, but there are some player-focused sections. What are the subclasses that people could get excited about for this book?
Yeah, so we have in our character options area of the book, we have 3 new subclasses that are based around this esoteric magic source called Dunamancy, which was introduced by the Kryn dynasty, the Drow society that exists in Jorhas. It's based around potentiality, potential power and magic, and probability, which then can manipulate time to an extent, localized gravity, entropy, themes like that. And so there are a number of new spells that expand into the themes of Dunamancy, and there are 3 subclasses that are based around its use. There's a martial fighter subclass called an Echo Knight, which uses this Dunamis energy to pluck an unrealized self of a shadow clone of themselves from a dying timeline and use it in tandem with them on the battlefield. So imagine having like a shadow, an echo, a clone of yourself, a fighter, and you can share elements of location and attacks and other features between the 2 of you before it gets dispersed or destroyed. And so that's the Echo Knight subclass. Then we have 2 wizard classes. One that is the Chronergist, which uses Dunamis and other forms of arcane magic to manipulate time in subtle and localized ways, both for themselves, their allies, and enemies. And then we have the Graviturgist, which is a wizard who focuses on manipulation.
That word always trips me up. So
no worry. Manipulation of gravity, localized, where it can control the battlefield and improve the impact and the damage of weapons that are drawn towards their foes with higher velocity, or crush the gravity of a region to make it more challenging for enemies to traverse or survive. So it's got a lot of fun, a little bit of like a I guess we'd say a physics flair to it, kind of like a quantum and astrophysics flair to some of the magic, which was kind of the inspiration for a lot of Dunamancy. And players get to look forward to those. And we have a great chapter called the Heroic Chronicle, which is James Hake's main, or Joey Hake's main kind of baby for this, where it allows a player, or even Dungeon Master for their NPCs or anything else, it allows a player to create a backstory that ties them into Wildemount intrinsically, without having to do more than just roll a few dice or pick off charts. That involves discovering how big your family was. It involves what faction you may be tied to initially, where you were born and where you grew up, what your favorite foods were based on where you grew up, whether you have allies or rivals in the world based on your upbringing and where they might be from. Through a series of pages, you could roll dice or choose, and at the end of just flipping around for 10 pages or so, you have a tied backstory to Wildemount that you can then flesh out and play off of, and it's beautiful and it's super great tool for players.
Cool.
Yes, and it doesn't take the place of, like if you got your own concept for a character and what their origins are, it doesn't replace that. It's just a handy tool to have if you need to fill in gaps.
Yeah.
Or you haven't fully fleshed out your character. And to Matt's point, it gives you very specific hooks into Wildemount.
I've never met a table I didn't want to roll on.
I mean,
Here's a table
table.
of fateful moments.
Oh, I'm gonna roll.
Okay.
We'll see what Shelly gets here.
All right. Now you have to. This is a D20 table, so go ahead.
I got a 6.
6, your fateful moment. You were the sole survivor when a horde of rampaging monsters raided your village or your neighborhood. You have proficiency in the stealth skill or proficiency with martial weapons, your choice.
Clearly, I was with the monsters. I helped plan all that. Bam! Backstory.
It happens.
You roll.
Okay, I'll roll. Let's see what happens. 2.
2. You know what? I'm going to have you roll on the mysterious secrets table, but we'll keep the 2.
I like that.
Your mysterious secret is, I was the only witness to a cold-blooded murder. In the aftermath, I saw the killer take a gold coin with a ruby inlaid at its center from the victim's body.
Oh, man. It looked a lot like your character
I
was
was
the
gonna say,
cold-blooded
it sounds
killer.
like it might be
if you were
me.
siding with the
And
monsters.
since we're all getting into this action, could I have that die?
Yeah. Ooh,
I will roll on the prophecy inspirations.
17.
Roll the 17. I will stand before Princess Surya Dwendal and briefly hold the fate of the empire in my hand. I won't realize the gravity of my decision until it is too late.
My name is Serena, by the way. We have created a little campaign
I feel a
here.
great gravity.
Stand before me.
That's excellent.
That is so fun.
So how does this interact with backgrounds, or does it feels like a background plus
Yeah.
type of thing?
kind of, yeah. The background, it doesn't replace it. It's just
Right.
kind of an addendum attached to it, and it's up to the dungeon master to to incorporate or allow as much as they want to. This is a tool for them to tie their characters into the world if they want to. And it's also a great tool for dungeon masters to create NPCs if you need to.
Oh,
with
that's
a
right.
brief period of
yes.
time. You can roll up a few of these tables in 2 minutes and have a really fleshed out NPC that you can incorporate into your next session.
I love the idea also to be a dungeon master that pre-rolls in advance and then you hand like your players.
Right.
Like you kind
'Cause
of assign
you don't get to
them.
pick your family, right?
No.
No.
I mean,
Just to give
Some
them
of us
like
do.
that kind of so much
when you murder them.
inspiration.
No, I'm just kidding. I love all that. I love one aspect I want, because we mentioned the 4 different regions as part of it being introduced. It can be hard for a dungeon master to say, like, here's the entire continent.
Yes.
Play in it, but you can. There is some stuff in this book, right, where you can start off in one of these regions and kind of explore it in miniature before you move out to
Not
other
1,
places.
not 2, not 3, but
15.
4.
Dang it! I failed
Keep working
Dunamancy
on
when
it.
I was a
4
kid.
starter adventures. You want to talk a little bit about those, Matt?
Yeah. So for those 4 regions I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that we had an anchor.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
You're frozen.
Suspense.
Matt is frozen.
Dun dun dun.
He's in the frozen north.
He's in the bitter north. Somebody has cast a spell.
Point, no experience. Oh, did you lose my audio? Are we here now?
Oh, You're back now.
You're back.
Yes? Great.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So, for these 4 regions, we wanted to ensure that we had these anchor points for people to start a campaign if they had a lot of experience or no experience dungeon mastering. And it allowed them to kind of pick a point, or their group to pick a point to begin. And so we have one adventure that brings you from levels 1 to 3 in the Menagerie Coast. That's more of a nautical island hopping adventure, if you want that to be your theme. We have one adventure in the Dwendalian Empire that deals more with the local society of Hupperdook, kind of the gnomish town, and some subterfuge that's going on. It's more of a, for lack of a better term, an intrigue and almost like Bond villain-like adventure that take you from levels 1 to 3.
But they're gnomes?
They're gnomes.
Oh, the gnomes in Bond. Oh, I love all that. What would be I have to take advantage of you being a voice actor. What's your gnome voice for a gnome spy?
A gnomish Bond?
Yeah.
They call me Gunter. A snipe. Try as you might, and many do try. None have caught up to me.
There you go.
Oh, that's good.
Love it. All right, what's
Air
the...
slip.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And there's an adventure in the Biting North that deals with kind of Eiselcross and the graying wildlands up there. That's more of like that colder, isolated, pushing through the elements to solve a mystery and a personal danger. And then we have an adventure in Jorhas that deals with the heavy conflict between the Dundalian Empire and the Kryn dynasty, in which you are going through the swamps with the roving, mobile, goblinoid city of Urzin, which is all built upon the back of giant horizon-back tortoises, and having to deal with an outpost from the Empire and the dangers therein. So you get to pick one of these 4 different regions, all with their own unique theming, and just jump in and start a campaign there. And if you want to continue a campaign in that region thereafter, you can do that, or you could just move on to where all the rest of Wildemount has to offer.
Or you can just take the whole city on tortoises idea and plop that into your own campaign.
Heck yeah.
Yes.
That's what I love about all these 5th edition setting books is that a clever dungeon master can just pick and pull and, similar to how you did in building this together,
Exactly.
make it their own.
Yeah, and that was very much kind of a big push on this too, was to ensure that this setting is great as its own setting, but there are many pieces here that are modular and can be pulled to anybody else's homebrew setting or existing D&D IP setting and make it your own. So it's designed to be there to be used in full or use any small piece of the buffalo you like.
Now, there's definitely going to be fans of the show, of Critical Role, who love those characters and want to embody them or at least have their own players in this campaign interact with them in any way. How would you suggest doing that with this book?
If that is the case, then you could consider running storylines, running adventures that can intersect with some of the elements of the Mighty Nine's adventures in our Critical Role campaign. And then there are websites that keep track of the character stats if you want to keep it super accurate to what the party has at their disposal, or you can customize them as NPC blocks, with just your favorite kind of hand-picked parts of what they do in the show. It's up to you, but this campaign book does technically, from a timeline standpoint, happen around episode 50 of our second campaign.
Okay.
But you can customize it
That was my
however
episode.
you want.
That was the introduction of Spurt. Yeah.
and the introduction and departure of...
Yes.
The brightest stars burn in 10 minutes. I guess.
Yeah, pretty much. Short
that's
and
amazing.
sweet.
Yeah.
Like all
Super-
good
super
characters.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, and I think people will get a kick out of being able to weave them through. Obviously, players want to have their own story, so not necessarily use the Mighty Nine as a crutch or anything like that. But you want to be able to, like when people play in a Star Wars campaign or a Star Trek role-playing game, like you want to know that Kirk and Picard and Luke Skywalker are all there in the background.
Oh yeah, and they're existing and they're having their own adventures, and depending on where you want to have it in the timeline, you could cross with the adventures from our campaign or thereafter. And of course, Vox Machina from our first campaign, while it's 20 years later, most of them are still out there in Exandria pursuing their life and ripe to be pulled into your home campaign as NPCs as well.
Okay, you have 1 minute left. Final question for Matt? No?
I don't even know. Too much pressure. Do we have a voice? Advice? What do we do?
What are you most excited about people to open up this book
Good
and
one.
get out of it?
Oh, that's a big question. I am most excited to hear I'm most excited when the book has been out for a while, to start meeting people at conventions or events and hear the stories that they've forged in this world. I'm excited to show people what we've done, but I'm more excited to see what people do with it. That to me is what's most inspiring.
I love
Good
it.
answer.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited about getting this in the hands of fans. March 17th, everyone will be able to grab it all over the world and in whatever format you want. But of course, will you be going to your friendly local game store to try to buy a copy, or at least see people picking it up and get some firsthand?
Incognito.
Yeah, exactly. Will you have a mask on?
Well, maybe. I have a few shops I'm going to pop through and pick up some copies and get it for some friends and family. I'm going to send it out to my parents and say, like, look, I'm glad you didn't tell me to stop playing this game.
Oh, no. We're all glad they didn't stop telling you.
I'm going to send that to my parents, too. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. We are really excited about this release on March 17th, and we'll be getting more and more lore about it coming out hopefully very soon.
No, thank you guys for having me, and thank you, Chris, for dealing with me through the entirety of this wonderful book's process.
It was nothing but a pleasure.
Thank you, buddy. Thank
Love
you guys.
it.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks,
All right.
Matt.
Cheers. Thanks, Matt. Take it easy.